Chapter 3. The Opening Trumps, Symbols and Archetypes. Figure 1. The Fool. We have already looked at the Fool in one aspect, the image of a spirit totally free, but we can look at the Fool from another side, the leap into the archetype world of the Trumps. Imagine yourself entering a strange landscape, a world of magicians, of people hanging upside down, and of dancers in the bright air. You can enter through a leap from a height, through a dark cave, a labyrinth, or even by climbing down a rabbit hole chasing a Victorian rabbit with a pocket watch. Whichever way you choose, you are a fool to do so. Why look into the deep world of the mind when you can stay safely in the ordinary landscape of job, home, and family? Herman Melville in Moby Dick warned his readers not to take even a step outside the ordinary path laid out for you by society. You may not get back again. And yet for those willing to take the chance, the leap can bring joy, adventure, and finally for those with the courage to keep going when the wonderland becomes more fearsome than joyous, the leap can bring knowledge, peace, and liberation. Interestingly, the Fool archetype appears more in mythology than in structured religion. An institutionalized church can hardly urge people beyond the limits of institutions. Instead, the churches offer us a safe haven from the fears of life. Mythology leads directly into the heart of those fears. And in very culture, the mythological landscape contains the image of the trickster, pushing, goading, jabbing the kings and heroes whenever they turn away from the inner world of truth. In the King Arthur legends, Merlin appears not only as a sorcerer and wise man, but as a trickster. Constantly, he appears before Arthur in disguise as a child, a beggar, an old peasant. The young king, already seduced into pompousness by his high social position, never recognizes Merlin until his companions point out that he has been tricked again. More importantly than laws or military strategy is the ability to see through illusions. The tireless masters were famous for playing tricks on their disciples. The Fool archetype has even found social expression as the real court jester. We all know the image from the King Lear of the Fool, permitted to tell the king truths no one else could dare to express. Today, our comedians and satirists enjoy something of the same privilege. In many countries, our early carnival relies all the wildness repressed through the rest of the year. Sex is freer, various laws are suspended. People go in disguises, and the King of Fools is chosen to reside over the festival. Today in Europe and in North America, April Fool's Day remains April Fool's Day. April the 1st remains April's Fool's Day, a time for tricks and practical jokes. The picture beside that of the rider pack shows the Fool as conceived by Oswald Worth. An older tradition than that of the white, it pictures the archetype as a grotesque wanderer. His image has been interpreted variously as the soul before enlightenment, a newborn child entering the world of experience and the principle of anarchy. Elizabeth H. has provided an interesting interpretation of Worth's grotesque image of the Fool, placing him between judgment and the world. She describes the Fool as what the outside world sees when it looks upon someone who is truly enlightened. Because the Fool does not follow their rules or share their weaknesses, he appears to them in this ugly, distorted way. H describes the Fool's face as a mask, but they're not by himself, but by the outside world. This last card, the world, represents the same enlightened person but viewed from inside, that is, by himself. In some early tarot decks, the Fool appeared as a giant court jester towering over people around him. His title was the Fool of God. The term has also been used for idiots, harmless madmen, and severe epileptics, all of whom were thought to be in touch with a greater wisdom precisely because they were out of touch with the rest of us. The archetype persists in modern popular mythology as well. By their fantastic primitive nature, comic books often reflect mythological themes better than novels. In Batman, the hero's strongest enemy is called the Joker, a figure who has no past and is never seen without the wild makeup of a Joker and a deck of cards. The Joker is not descended from the Fool, as I and other Taoists have assumed. It was invented by a New York poker club as a wild card to make the game more interesting. It does, however, call forth the same archetype as the Fool, being based on the court jester. The rivalry of Batman and the Joker sends a clear message to their readers: do not rebel against social values. Support law and order. In recent years, the magazine has described the Joker as insane rather than criminal. To society, the way of the Fool, instinct rather than rules, is a dangerous insanity. So far, we have looked at the Fool as the other probing us from the complacency with his jokes and disguises. As a self, he represents that long tradition of the foolish brother or sister, despised by the other brother and sister, yet finally able to win the princess or the prince through instinctive wit and kindness. Curiously, the image of the Fool as self occurs more in fairy tales and myths. We look at myths as representing forces larger than ourselves. The simpler fairy tales allows us to express our own foolishness. Like Boots or Glutch in the fairy tales, always accompanied by various animal helpers, the Fool is almost every deck walks with a companion. In White, the figure is a leaping dog, in others a cat or even a crocodile. The animal symbolizes the forces of a nature and the animal self of man, all in harmony with the spirit who acts from instinct. Mythological dogs are often terrifying, for example, the hounds of hell chasing lost souls, but is really the same beast, only our attitude changes. Deny your inner self and it becomes ferocious, obey it and it becomes benign. Waite's Fool holds a white rose. Roses symbolize passion, while white, the traditional color of purity, together with the delicate way the flower is held, indicate the passions raised to a higher level. The Greeks saw Eros, the god of love, as a trickster and making the most proper people act ridiculous, but those who already express their fully will not be thrown by love. The Greeks also spoke of Eros and other forms as the animating forces of the universe. The bag behind him carries his experiences. He does not abandon them. He is not mindless. They simply do not control him in the way that our memories and traumas so often control our lives. The big bag, or the bag, bears the head of an eagle, symbol of the soaring spirit. His high instinct fills and transforms all experience. The eagle is also a symbol of Scorpio raised to a higher level, that is, sexuality raised to spirit. This idea of the connection between sex and spirit will come up again with the card of the devil. Over his shoulder, the Fool carries a stick, like a tramp, but this stick is actually a wand, symbol of power. The magician and the chariot driver also carry wands, but self-consciously with a powerful grip. The Fool and the world dancer holds their wands so casually we hardly notice them. We could be more foolish than to take a magic wand and use it to carry our bags. We can imagine a fairy tale in which the foolish younger brother finds a stick by the side of the road and carries it, not recognizing it is or it has the lost wand of a wizard, and therefore not being destroyed like his two older brothers who tried to wield it for their own profit. The Fool's wand is black, the others are white. For the unconscious Fool, the spirit force remains always in potential, always ready, because he is not consciously directing it. We tend to misunderstand the color black, seeing it as evil or negating of life. Rather, black means all things being possible, infinite energy of life beyond consciousness as constructed any boundaries. When we fear blackness or darkness, we fear the deep unconscious source of life itself. Like the Joker, the Fool really belongs anywhere in the deck. In combination with and between any of the other cards, he is the animating force giving life to the static images. In the major arcana, he belongs wherever there is a difficult transition. Hence his positions at the beginning, where there is the transition from the everyday world of the minor arcana to the world of archetypes. The Fool also helps us jump the gap from one line to the next, that is, from the chariot to strength, from temperance to the devil. To reach the chariot or temperance requires great effort and courage, and without the Fool's readiness to leap into new territory, we would likely stop with what we have already achieved. The Fool belongs as well with those cards of difficult passage, such as the Moon and Death. Observe the winding road on each of these two, where he urges us on despite our fears. In the minor arcana, the Fool relates first of all to wands, action, eagerness, movement without thought, but it connects as well to cups with their emphasis on imagination and instinct. The Fool in fact combines these two suits. Later we see that this combination fire and water represents the way of transformation. Finally, the questions arises of the Fool's place in divinatory readings. I've already mentioned the importance of reading for a fuller understanding of the cards. Even more, they help us apply the wisdom of the cards to our daily lives. And reading the Fool speaks to us of a courage and optimism, urging faith in ourselves and in life. At difficult times when we come under pressure from people around us to be practical, the Fool reminds us that our own inner selves can best tell us what to do. The Fool can often symbolize beginnings, courageously leaping off into some new phase of life, particularly when the leap is taken from some deep feeling rather than careful planning. These belong to the Fool in its normal position. We must also consider the reversed meanings, that is, when we have mixed the cards, makes the Fool come out with the feet on the top. Reversed meanings are controversial among tarot commentators. Those who give formulas as meanings usually just turn the formula around, a simplistic method which has led several interpreters to abandon the whole idea of reversed meanings. But we can also look at reversals as deepening the meaning of the card as a whole. In general, a reversed card indicates that the qualities of that card have become blocked, distorted, or channeled in another direction. For the Fool, a reversal meaning, first of all, a failure to follow your instincts. It can mean not taking a chance at some crucial time because of fear or depending too much on plans and the practical advice of others. Another reverse meaning of the Fool will appear at first to contradict the one just given. Recklessness, wildness, crazy schemes all seems to the opposite of overcaution. And yet, they originate from the same weakness, a failure to act from inside. The reckless person superimposes a conscious or artificial foolishness on his life, both because he does not trust the unconscious to act as a guide and because he is also afraid of doing nothing. This second reversed meaning suggests another dimension to the Fool, the awareness that great chances must be taken only at the proper time. There are, after all, many times when caution is needed and times when it is better to do nothing at all. The basic thing any oracle teaches us is that no action or attitude is right or wrong, except in its proper context. As we go further into the tarot, we will see that this concept of the proper time permeates the cards and is, in fact, the true key to their correct use. The card in the Rider pack that falls exactly in the middle of the three lines, that is justice, means a proper response. The Magician. The Magician emerges very directly from the Fool in the image of the trickster wizard. As mentioned above, Merlin fulfills both these roles as well as that of a teacher and wise man. Many other myths make the same connection. Earlier tarot decks pictured Trump number 1 as a conjurer rather than a magus, or even a juggler tossing colored balls in the air. Charles Williams described him as a juggler tossing the stars and planets. Most modern images of the Trump follows Waite's wizard raising a magic wand to bring into reality the spirit force, the energy of life in its most creative form. He holds the wand carefully, aware of that psychic power the Fool carried so lightly in his shoulder. Thus, the Magician, as the beginning of the major arcana proper, represents consciousness, action, and creation. He symbolizes the idea of manifestation, that is, making something real out of the possibilities in life. Therefore, we see the four emblems of the minor arcana lying on a table in front of him. He not only uses the physical world for his magical operations, the four element emblems are all objects used by wizards in their rituals, but he also creates the world in the sense of giving life a meaning and direction. The magician stands surrounded by flowers reminds us that the emotional and creative power we feel in our lives needs to be grounded in physical reality for us to get any value from it. Unless we make something of our potentials, they do not really exist. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The Bible begins at the moment the Spirit descends into physical reality. For us in the physical world, we can talk of nothing before this moment. In the linking of the Torah with the Hebrew alphabet, the fool often receives the first letter Aleph. Aleph bears no sound. It is a silent carrier of vowels and therefore symbolizes nothing. It is the first letter of the Ten Commandments. This would assign the second Hebrew letter, Beth, the first letter with an actual sound, to the magician. Beth is the first letter of Genesis. Look at Waite's picture of the magician. He is not casting spells or conjuring up demons. He simply stands with one hand raised to heaven and the other pointed to the green earth. He is a lightning rod. By opening himself up to the Spirit, he draws it down into himself, and then that downward hand, like a lightning rod buried into the ground, runs the energy into the earth, into reality. We see many accounts of the descent of the Spirit in the Bible, in other religious texts, and in contrary religious experience. People speak in tongues in Pentecostal churches. They scream and shout and roll on the floor at gospel meetings. The priest giving communion sees himself as a vessel or a channel for the Holy Ghost. But we can see this experience in much simpler non-religious terms as well. People tremble with the excitement at spouting events. I'm so excited I could burst. In a new love affair or at the start of a new career, we feel power filling us. You can sometimes see people at the opening of some important phase of their lives, tapping their legs up and down, half bounced in their seats, filled with some energy they cannot seem to discharge. And writers and artists, when their work is going well, will experience themselves as almost passive channels for a spirit-like force. The word inspiration, originally meant filled with holy breath, derives from the same root as spirit. Notice that all of these examples, all but the priest and the artist, are seized with a frenzy. The possessed churchgoer and the teenager about to burst at a football game share the feeling that their bodies are overwhelmed with a power too great for it. Far from being gentle, the surge of energy can be almost painful. The person in religious fever shouts and leaps about in order to release an unbearable energy. The life force that fills the universe is not gentle nor benign. It must be discharged, grounded in something real, because our bodies ourselves are not meant to contain it, but only pass it on. Thus, the artist does not join in the physical frenzy because she or he is discharging that power into the painting. Similarly, the priest passes the power into the bread and wine. We function best as a channel for energy. Unless we follow the path of the high priestess in withdrawing from the world, we live our lives most fully when we create or are active. Create does not mean simply art, but an activity that produces something real and valuable outside of ourselves. Many people experience feelings of being powerful so infrequently that they try to hold on to them. By doing nothing, they hope to preserve their magic moment, but we can really hold on to power in our lives only by constantly discharging it. By releasing creative power, we open ourselves to receive a further flow. However, by trying to hold on to it, we block channels that the sense of power, which is really life itself, withers within us. The spectator at the football game, even the possessed churchgoer, will find their excitement gone after the event that triggered it has ended. But the craftsman or scientist or teacher, or for that matter the tarot reader, will find the power increase over the years the more they discharge it into physical reality. When we look at the magician, those of us who feel a lack or a flatness in our lives will be drawn to the wand raised towards heaven. But the real magic rests in that finger pointing towards the earth. That ability to create gives him his title. His image stems not only from the trickster conjurer, but also from the archetype hero. In our culture, this would be Prometheus. He brought the heavenly fire down to weak and cold humanity. In the West, we tend to see wizards as manipulators. They learn secret techniques or make deals with Satan in order to gain personal power. This somewhat deceits images come across partly from the magicians themselves. since they make charms to find buried treasure, but also from the church, which sees magicians who deal directly with the spirit instead of going through official priesthood as competitors. The tarot and all occult sciences are in a sense of revolutionary because they teach direct salvation in this life through your own efforts. We can get different concept of the magician through the image of the shaman, a medicine man. Because no hierarchical church has arisen to banish the shamans, they have not become isolated from the community. They serve as healers, teachers, and directors of the soul after death. Like the wizards, the shamans study and learn complicated techniques. Their magical vocabulary is often much larger than the everyday vocabulary of the people around them. None of this training, however, is used to manipulate the spirit or for personal gain. Rather, the shaman only seeks to become a proper channel both for himself so he will not be overwhelmed and for the community so he can serve them better. He knows the great power that will enter him at moments of ecstasy, that he wants to make sure it doesn't destroy him and make him of noise to the people around him. Like the wizard, the shaman has developed his will to the point where he can direct the fire that fills him. At the same time, he remains open, allowing his ego to dissolve under the direct onslaught of the spirit. It says something about our culture that our wizards stand inside magic circles to make sure the demons cannot touch them. We can apply the shaman attitude to our use of the whole tarot deck. We study the cards, learn the symbolic language, even specific formulas in order to give a direction to the feelings that arouse in us. But we must not forget that the true magic lies in the images themselves and not the explanations. The divinatory meanings of the magician derive from both hands, the ones which receives the power and the ones which directs. The card means, first of all, an awareness of power in your life of spirit or simple excitement possessing you. It also means, depending on its position and your reaction to it, someone else's power affecting you. Like the Fool, the card refers to the beginnings, but here the first actual steps. It can mean both the inspiration to begin some new project or phase of life and the excitement that sustains you through the hard work to reach your goal. For many people, the magician can become a strong personal symbol for the creative force throughout their lives. Secondly, the magician means willpower. The will unified and directed towards goals. It means having great strength because all your energy is channeled in a specific direction. People who seem always to get what they want in life are often people who simply know that they want and can direct their energy. The magician teaches us that both willpower and success derive from being conscious of the power available to everyone. Most people rarely act, instead they react, being knocked from one experience to the next. To act is to direct your strength through your will to the places where you want to go. The magician reverse signifies that in some way the proper flow of energy has become disrupted or blocked. It can mean a weakness or lack of will or a confusion of purpose that leads to doing nothing. The power is there, but we cannot touch it. The card reversed can mean the lethargic apathy that characterizes depression. The reverse trump can also mean power abused, a person who uses his or her very strong character to exert a destructive influence on others. The most direct example of this would of course be the psychic regression of black magic. Finally, the magician reversed indicates mental disquiet, hallucinations, fear, and particularly fear of madness. This problem arises when the energy of spirit fire enters a person who does not know how to direct it into an outer reality. If we do not ground the lightning, it can become trapped in the body and force itself on our awareness as anxiety or hallucinations. Anyone who has ever gone through a moment of total panic will know that actual mental anxiety is a very physical experience. The feeling of the body running wild like a fire out of control. The word panic means possessed by the god Pan, himself a symbol of magical forces. Think again of the lightning rod. It not only attacks the bolt, but runs into the dirt. Without that connection to the earth, the lightning would burn down the house. Several writers have commented on the relationship between shamanism and what the West calls schizophrenia. Shamans are often not so much chosen as found. When in our culture, a young person experiences vision, fearful hallucinations, we do not know what to do with such experiences other than to try to stop them by drugs or self-control. but in other cultures, such people receive training. This is not to say that madness does not exist or is not recognized in archaic cultures. Rather, the training is meant to prevent madness by challenging the experiences into a productive direction. The initiates learn through study with an established shaman and through physical techniques such as fasting how to understand, structure, and finally direct their visionary experiences towards the service of the community. The magician, reverse, should not be banished or confined. Instead, we must find a way to turn it right side up. The High Priestess. Bill Butler in the Definitive Tarot has commented on the historical legendary sources for this female archetype. Throughout the Middle Ages, the story persisted that a woman was once elected pope. Disguised for years as a man, this supposed Pope Joan made her way through the church hierarchy to stop position only to die in childbirth during the Easter celebration. Pope Joan was likely a legend. The Visconti Papas was real. In the late 13th century, in an Italian group, the Guglielmites believed that their founder, Guglielmo of Bohemia, who died in 1281, would rise again in 1300 and begin a new age in which women would be popes. Jumping ahead, they elected a woman named Manfreda Visconti as the first papess. The church graphically ended this hearsay by burning Sister Manfreda in 1300, the year of the expected new age. Some 150 years later, the same Visconti family commissioned the first set of tarot cards as we know them. Among these unnumbered and unnamed trumps appeared a picture of a woman later text titled the Papess. The name persisted until the 18th century when Corte de Gabelin believed the tarot to originate in the Isis religion of ancient Egypt, changed the name to the High Priestess. Today, both names exist as well as Vieldel's Isis, and the weight image of the card derives directly from the Isis priestess symbolic clothing, particularly the crown representing the three phases of the moon. The Pope Joan legend of Manfred Visconti are not simply his historical curiosities. They illustrate a major social development in the Middle Ages, a reintroduction of the female and feminine principles into religion and cosmology. The images and the concepts associated with the masculine role had dominated both the church and Jewish religions for centuries. As a result, ordinary people experienced the religions of the priests and rabbis as remote, harsh, and unapproachable. With their emphasis on sin, judgment, and punishment, they wanted qualities of mercy and love, and they identified with these with women. Like a mother shelters her child from some distant instructions of the father, a female deity supposedly would intrude for the pathetic sinners against the unremitting judgment of the father. It is interesting to realize that in many ways the church saw Christ as the Son in exactly that role of introducing love and compassion, yet people demanded a female. Even the idea of the church as Mother Church did not go far enough. Finally, the church capitulated by raising the Virgin Mary almost to the level of Christ himself. Many writers and scholars believe that the elevation of Mary, as well as the priest's costume of long skirts, originated in the church's desire to assimilate a persistent goddess religion from the days before Christianity. If this is true, it would indicate not so much a cultural conservationism as the power of the female archetype to maintain a hold and partially triumph against oppression. In Judaism, the official religion of the rabbis managed to resist an insurgent feminism. In Judaism, the official religion of the rabbis managed to resist any insurgent feminism. The people's need, however, took a hold in another era. The long tradition of the Kabbalah, the Kabbalists took a term from the Talmud, Shekhinah, which meant God's glory manifested in its physical world, and revised it to make it God's anima, or female side. The Kabbalists have revised the idea of Adam, making him originally hermaphroditic. The separation of Eve from Adam, even the separation of the Shekinah from God, became images of isolation and exile, sometimes connected to Adam and the sin of disobedience. So far, we have looked at the benign motherly qualities of female mythological figures. Historically, however, female deities have always shown a dark hidden side as well. To introduce the female at all is to introduce the whole archetype. The tarot splits up the female archetypes into two trumps, and actually assigns the benign qualities to the second one, Trump 3, the Empress. The High Priestess herself represents a deeper, more subtle aspect of the female, that of the dark, the mysterious, and the hidden. As such, she connects to the virgin side of the Virgin Mary, the pure daughter side of the Ch3, who was pictured simultaneously as mother, wife, and daughter. We should realize that this assigning of qualities to women comes mostly from men and male ideas. The Kabbalists, the occultists, and the tarot designers all deplored the separation of men and women into categories and taught unification as a final goal. This is shown by the world dancer of the tarot. They were ahead of the established religion, which even debated whether women had souls or not. Nevertheless, men still made the categories to men. Women have always appeared mysterious, strange, and when safely in their mother role, loving and merciful. Women seem alien to men, more subtle in their thinking and non-rational. In our time, constant novels and films have pictured simple men manipulated by cunning women. The fact that the menstrual cycle lasts about as long as the lunar cycle links women to that remote, silvery body. Menstruation itself, a copious bleeding from the genitals with no loss of life, has simply terrified men through the centuries. Even today, superstitious Jews believe that one drop of menstrual blood will kill a plant. The fearful mystery of birth further connected women to the idea of darkness. The fetus grows, and the soul enters it in the warm, moist of darkness of the womb. Motherhood linked women to the earth, and there too darkness dominates. Seeds lie in the ground through the dark, dead winter to emerge as food under the warm, reassuring rays of the sun, which in many cultures is considered as male. Just as the sun rays penetrate the earth, so the male organ penetrates the female to leave a seed in her mysterious womb. We can easily see how men came to view themselves as active and women as both passive and mysterious. People often link passive with negative, or that is inferior and weak, but passivity contains its own power. It gives the mind a chance to work. People who only know action never get a chance to reflect on what that action has taught them. In a deeper sense, passivity allows the unconscious to emerge, although through withdrawal from outer involvement can we allow the inner voice of vision and psychic forces to speak to us. It is precisely to avoid this inner voice that many people never rest from action and movement. Our society, based completely on outer achievements, fosters a terror of the unconscious, yet without its wisdom, we can never fully know ourselves or the world. The High Priestess represents all of these qualities: darkness, mystery, psychic forces, and the power of the moon to stir the unconscious passively, and the wisdom gained from it. This wisdom cannot be expressed in rational terms. To try to do so would to immediately limit, narrow, and falsify it. Most people at some time have felt that they understood something in such a deep way that they could never manage to explain it. Myths serve as metaphors for deep psychic feelings, yet myths themselves, like the explanations given by theologians and anthropologists, are only symbols. The High Priestess signifies inner wisdom at its deepest level. She sits between two pillars representing both temples of Isis and the ancient Hebrew temple in Jerusalem, the dwelling place of God on earth, and in other words, the home of the Ch3. A veil hanging between the two pillars indicating that they were barred from entering the place of wisdom. The image of the veiled temple or sanctuary appears in many religions. The Ch3 was indeed said to dwell within the veiled ark of the temple. Now, most people assume we are somehow forbidden to pass the pillars of the High Priestess. In reality, we simply do not know how to enter. To enter behind the veil would be to know consciously the irrational wisdom of the unconscious. That is the goal of the entire major arcana. Look carefully at Smith's picture, and you can see that lies behind the veil by looking between the veil and the pillars. and what lies behind is water. No great temple or complex symbols, simply a pool of water, a line of hills, and the sky. The pool signifies the unconscious and the truth hidden there. The water is motionless, the secrets in its darkest depths hidden under a smooth surface. For most of us, at some times, the turbulent unconsciousness remains hidden under a placid layer of consciousness. We cannot enter the temple because we do not know how to get into ourselves. Therefore, we must travel through the tramps until we reach the star and the moon, where we can finally stir up the waters and return with the wisdom to the conscious light of the sun. The temple introduces the image of the two pillars and the theme of duality and opposites. The image occurs again and again through the trumps in such obvious places as the Hierophant's church pillars or the two towers of the moon, the pillars of the high priestess seen from the other side, but also in more subtle ways such as the two sphinxes of the chariot or the man of the woman of the lovers. Finally, judgment with the child raising between a man and a woman in the world, holding two wands, resolves the duality by uniting the inner mysteries with the outer awareness. The letters B and J stand for Boaz and Jachin, the names given to the two main pillars of the temple in Jerusalem. Obviously, the dark Boaz stands for passivity and mystery, while Jachin symbolizes action and consciousness. Notice, though, that the letters carry the reverse indications, a white B and a black J, like the dots in the tile symbol. The letters signify that duality is an illusion, and each extreme carries the other embedded inside it. In her lap, she holds a scroll marked Torah. This name refers to the Jewish law and the 5 books of Moses, which is usually spelled Torah in English. This particular spelling allows the word to serve as an anagram or an anagram for Torah. As the ultimate subject of all Kabbalistic meditation, like Christ's crucifixion for Christian mystics, the Torah carries a great deal of esoteric significance. The Kabbalists believe that the Torah, read on Saturday mornings in the synagogues, was only a representation, a kind of shadow of the true Torah, the living word of God that exists before the universe and contains within it all true existence. The Torah held by the high priestess, rolled up and partly concealed in her cloak, therefore signifies a higher knowledge close to us, with our lower understanding. We can describe it also as the psychic truths available to us only in the distorted form of myths and dreams. Earlier we spoke of the fool coming in at crucial moments of change to push us along. The gap between the high priestess and the Empress is one such moment. We can too easily be subdued by the dark coolness of the second trump. And even if we never really penetrated secrets, the person beginning in spiritual discipline often prefers to stay at the visionary level rather than go through the slow hard work needed to advance. Many people in more ordinary situations will find life too overwhelming, too vast, and too demanding for them to take part. We can best use the high priestess' passivity as a balance to the outward-looking attitude of the magician. But many people find the passive side extremely attractive. It represents an answer to struggle, a quiet retreat instead of the harsh glare of self-exposure when involved ourselves openly with other people. But the human mind does work like that. It requires passion and it needs to connect itself to the world. If we cannot penetrate the veil, the temple remains for us an empty place, devoid of meaning. The person who tries to live a completely passive life becomes depressed, more and more trapped in a cycle of apathy and fear. Virtually all moon goddess religions feature myths of the goddess's ferocious side. Ovid tells a story of Actaeon, a hunter, and therefore a figure who properly belonged to the world of action. He happened one day to see a stream and decided to follow it to its source, again water as a symbol of the unconscious. Thus he becomes separated from his dogs and the other hunters. And when he had reached the source, away from the active world, he saw a group of maidens. Among them naked stood the virgin goddess, Diana.
Now, if Actaeon had returned immediately to the outer world, he would have found life enriched. Instead, he allowed Diana's beauty to fascinate him. He stayed too long, and the goddess, discovering that a man had seen her nakedness, compared the high priestess's layer of clothing with the star maiden's nudity, turned Actaeon into a stag. When he ran away terrified, his own dogs tore him to pieces. Here the fool comes in, and remember the fool's dogs, leaping at his side, reminds us to dance lightly away from both these visions, the magician as well as the high priestess, until we are truly ready to assimilate them. The divinatory meanings of the high priestess deal with a sense of mystery in life, both things we do not know and things we cannot know. It indicates a sense of darkness sometimes as an area of fear in our lives, but also one of beauty. A period of passive withdrawal can enrich our lives by allowing things inside to awaken. As the emblem of secret knowledge, the trump indicates that feelings of intuitively understanding the answer to some great problem. If only we could express that answer consciously. More specifically, the card can refer to visions to the occult and psychic powers such as clairvoyance. It is most positive aspect. The high priestess signifies the potential in our lives, very strong possibilities we have not realized, though we can sense them as possible. Action must allow, or the potential will never be realized. Despite its deep wisdom, the card can sometimes carry a negative meaning. Like most of the trumps, the high priestess's value depends on the context of the other cards. Negatively, the trumps indicate passiveness at the wrong time or for too long, leading to weakness, fear of life and other people. It shows a person with strong intuition who cannot translate feelings into action, or a person afraid to open up to other people. Whether the good or bad aspects of the card comes up in a particular reading depends on the surrounding cards and of course the reader's intuition. We partake of the high priestess every time we read the cards. Very often, both meanings will apply. Human beings have more than one side. The high priestess is an archetype, a single-minded picture of one aspect of existence. When we reverse it, we bring in the missing qualities. The card reverse signifies a turn towards passion, towards a deep involvement with life and other people, in all ways, emotionally, sexually, and competitively. However, the pendulum can swing too far, and then the card reverse can symbolize a loss of that most precious knowledge, the sense of our inner selves.